Yeah, I know. I don't know why. All right. Today we're going to continue on with the layout and getting our style sheets and all the images working right that we copied over yesterday. And we'll talk about these links a little bit, and then we're going to create a page controller, which is what your assignment is for a week from Wednesday. A page controller will let us have different pages, like the home page, the About Us page, recipes, whatever, articles, whatever you guys need for your assignment. So let's continue on, and let's see if we can get this to look better. First of all, I notice I'm missing some images. So let's look at the images that I'm missing. And if we go to my layout, application.html.erb, this is the main master page, like in ASP, or the main page that all of the other views inherit. They get this by default, and their page gets put in place of this yield command. All right, so we have to fix all of these images here that are being loaded and replace these with a Rails image tag. And that does a couple things for us. It lets us put all of the images in this assets folder that we talked about yesterday. And it also takes care of the image that gets pre-processed or compiled. Remember, we talked about how it has some numbers at the end of an image so that it breaks the user's browser cache. So if you change an image, it will change that number, causing the browser to reload the new image down for itself. So changing this, instead of just saying image source equals, we're going to change this into an actual Rails method called image tag, which I did last week in my hello controller. I have this, I didn't do an image tag. I just did an image source equals here. So let's change that. The way we insert Rails into layouts is through the embedded Ruby, which you should have read about in the book. That's the ERB, the Epic Rap Battles, right? ERB, embedded Ruby. This allows us to insert code directly into the page, and Rails will interpret that and convert it into the right HTML or whatever is necessary so that the final product gets shipped out to the browser is all HTML. We're never shipping Rail or Ruby code down to the browser because the browser doesn't know what to do with it. It's not like JavaScript. JavaScript can be run on the browser itself, so I can send code to the browser in JavaScript, but I can't do it in Ruby. So I have to have a way of embedding this, letting the Rails interpreter convert this into text or HTML or whatever I want here. So there's a method, and we do that using these percent tags. So percent equals means to output the result of this command, okay, whatever that is. And this is going to be an image tag, which is a method. Okay. So this is a method in Rails that takes some arguments like the name of the image that we want to display here. So all I have to do is put the name of the image, and the image that was there, let's revert this so I remember what the image was cookiecook.ping. Okay, so all I have to do is change this to image tag, and put quotes around my image tag, take away the alt, and replace this with the percent and the percent equals. Okay, the equal sign means output whatever the result of this is. So this is a Ruby method that takes one argument, which is a string, figures out all that it needs to make an actual image tag correctly in HTML5, and spits out the actual HTML for this. So let's do that and reload our page now. And I got my little cook over here. Isn't that great? So if I look at the source, that image tag was here. This is the one I replaced. This is what got output from that method called image tag. It figured out the alt tag, and it figured out where the image tag resides. By default, all the images, but again, by convention, all the images are in the images folder in the assets folder. So it figured that out. I didn't have to tell it it's in the images folder. It knew where it was because it's an image tag. It assumes it's going to be in the images folder. Yes, right.
Does it figure out the alt tag just by the name of the picture?
Exactly by the name of the image itself, right. Yes.
So do you have to do this for every picture in your
Correct.
HTML?
Yes. You have to do it for every picture in your HTML, yes.
Does it do it? Do you have to do it for every page as well?
Well, again, this is a layout that gets copied to every other view, so we only have to do it once. This is like the master layout. And so if you have a special image on your content page, then you'll have to put one on that page. But, yes.
Does it automatically keep the size of the original image, keep the spacing right if, for whatever reason, the image doesn't load? I know in, like...
Okay, remember, this is just HTML. So it does not output the size, but you can output the size. You can add some parameters to the image tag to output the size. You can change the alt tag to be more specific if you want. But by default, this is what it spits out. So if we want to, and you can look at the actual tag. If you go to api.rubyonrails.org, this is the API documentation for all the methods in Rails. So what we want to search for here is image tag, and it's in the action view, which is what we're looking at here. Let's shrink this down. And this is the image tag, and we can add things like the alt tag if we want to give special a different alt tag than the name of the image. We could put that here. We can supply the size as a string, which is the width times the height. So we can do that, and it will output the correct information there. All right. So let's do that. Let's add a different alt tag. So we say alt, and what does this look like here? It's a hash, right? So we're actually sending hash values, and the alt tag, let's say I want to say Dave's picture. All right. Now I can put a single quote in there, Dave's picture. I also want to change the size, so I can say the size is going to be a width of, let's make it smaller, of a string 20 by 20. Okay, and then it will actually output the size correctly. All right, so let's do that and reload my image. And it shrunk my image down here. You see it's very small. But if I look at the source, it shows now it put in Dave's picture as the alt tag. It put a height tag and a width tag. So you can do that yourself. It doesn't figure out the height and width from the image itself automatically. You have to put that in yourself. All right. What's another cool thing while we're here is that we can, who here has had JavaScript? Okay, so about half of you. Did you do picture rollovers? So that when you mouse moved over, you had to do a mouse over event and then a mouse out event to change it back to something else? Well, that's a very common feature, and Rails has this built into the image tag method. So if you look at this here, the image tag has a mouse over element here. And all we have to do is give it another path to a particular image. All right, so I'm going to do something like this. And we'll call it, we'll put it at the end here. as another element. So the mouse over hash value is going to be the rails.ping. All right. So let's see what happens here. Actually, let me make it bigger. Because I can't even see it anymore. Yeah, I could just take the size out. Yeah. All right, so there's my image, and when I roll over it, bada boom, bada bing, I get a nice rollover effect. With one line of code, I didn't have to write any JavaScript. It did it for me. So if I look at the source code, it created an on-mouse event using this dot source, right? And an on-mouse over using this dot source. So that's how you would do it in the most simple way with inline JavaScript. Yes?
The mouse out just defaults back to the regular.
Yes. Right. And of course, you could override all of that and make your own more complicated JavaScript and things like that. But that's a common feature, so they've decided to put it directly into Rails. So isn't that cool? Yep.
Why images in the CSS don't have any on the HTML?
Yep. We'll do that in a second. All right. So I have to fix the rest of my image tags. Let's see if I have any more. I'm going to search for image. There's another one. So I'm going to replace that with the embedded Ruby command equals sign, % image tag, and then the name of the tag is going to take away the slash images. We don't need that because it'll figure that out, and we'll leave the alt tag off as well. So that's all I have to do for that one. Same here. And I could do a global search and replace on some patterns here if you want, but I only have a few. So we're going to do that. Thank you, RubyMine, for filling that in for me. All right, so I only had 3. So let's go back and make sure my picture looks better now. All right, getting there, looking better. Now I have the 2 images that were on the left over here. Those are just the advertised images. They're just silly things, but at least it all works. And I'm gonna take away the size so that my image tag works better. Because I don't know what the size is offhand. I'd have to go look that up. There we go. So it also changed it back to the little size of this guy, which makes it awkward, obviously. But all right, so we still have, so I've fixed all of the images in my main HTML, but a lot of people put images in the CSS, the background images and things like that. So let's go look at the style sheet that we copied in yesterday, which is styles.css. All right, so we have to look for any image that I have. And I've got a few. So this URL here needs to change. And one thing with RubyMine is that it doesn't like, it doesn't find all the images correctly. So for this, it's not in the images folder. It's going to be in the assets folder. And so the assets and the images is now secondary. Rails will figure this out and know that it's an image and look in the images folder. So I don't have to give a specific path to that. I just have to say it's in the assets folder. All right. So let's make sure I don't have any more.
Can you control F JPEG?
Yeah, unless you have some pings. Yeah, but yeah, you can do all of that. So let's reload this puppy. Now we're starting to get there. I got some background here, and it's starting to look a little better. Isn't that great? Now the other thing we have to deal with, remember we put the fonts that this one had in the top level of the site. So relative to where this CSS is, it would be easiest just to say the URL would be at the top level of the site. So I'm going to make these all the URLs go to the top level. That's a, yeah. Oops.
Okay, now if you're getting crowd prepared, you're in trouble.
So probably the best thing to search for would be URL, because that kind of finds all of the tags, except for that local one. All right, so now let's reload it, and it should find my images, my font now. There we go. My font changed, and now it's loading the right fonts for my browser. Okay. Isn't that great? Starting to look better. Almost like common sense. It's a lot of convention here. All right, so has anybody gotten this far on their own? A couple of you guys have, I know, if you've been in here. All right, so one thing that kind of, I was playing with this last night, one thing that kind of stumped me, because this is a different design I haven't used before, was where the heck are these parentheses sharp things coming from?
Well, that's the link to the website is. I just can't figure out how to remove them.
Right, so where's it coming from? If I look at the source, there is nothing in here for these links that has a parentheses sharp in it. That is not there.
It's got to be a Rails default.
No, it's not a Rails default either.
Really?
Ken figured it out. It's actually in the style sheet, and something that I never use, but they use it for, it's in the print style sheet. So if we look at the print style sheet here, they have this after for link and visited, where they add content, HTML content of these parentheses and the href. So if I were to change in my application layout, let's look at my nav here. Let's say that I want my home to go to / and my about us to go to about us. So if I reload this now, it's going to find whatever that URL was and put it inside of the parentheses there. See that?
Why is it loading the,
That took me about 10 minutes to find that last night. That was a real pain.
why is it loading the print sheet before the main?
Aha, so now we come up to that problem. Why is it loading the print sheet before the style sheet? Remember, because P comes before S. So the require here, remember that this was they call it a manifest file. It's basically requiring all of the CSS files in the style sheet folder, and it's loading them one at a time. So the first one is requiring self, which means it's loading application.css. Then it loads pages, print, say, and styles. So that print has a style that my styles doesn't have, so they're both applied all the time. So if I look at my source code, you'll see it's a media all, right? So see this media all? So for my print style sheet, it's loading it for all media, not just the screen, not just the printer. It's loading it for the screen as well. Everybody see that? And you can see that it's loading it in alphabetical order here. So we have to fix that. We have to tell it, and so because we have this print style, we have to kind of fix this, and the way I did it was, instead of requiring everything, I said require styles. All right, now that might fail later on because I'm no longer loading my say and my pages, but typically I don't use those anyway. I usually use one style sheet. So I'm going to require my styles specifically, and I'm not going to require my print style. Then in my layout, I have to fix the include here. So I want to include the application manifest, but only for the screen. Right? I only want to see that for my screen. And then I want to load the print style sheet, so I can add another style sheet link tag to a specific print style sheet and say I want that media to be only the print. All right, so I've overridden some of the defaults of Rails, and I've fixed my problem, so now my media, my print style sheet will only be loaded if I do the print from my browser. Right? You guys all know that. All right? So now when I reload this, it takes away that specific style, and I'm starting to look even better. Isn't that great? It's way over here because I've enlarged my thing so much. All right? So now the next thing, we're not going to get into the links yet because that requires some routing stuff. But I can change some of these. I can change what they go to. I'm going to have products. I'm going to have articles here. I'm going to have a calendar. I'm going to have login. And I might have a blog. So I'm going to copy and make a new one called blog. All right. And if you notice in Canvas, I changed, so that's basically what I want you guys to do, except we're going to do a lot more than that. That gets you started. You got your CSS in the right place, your images in the right place, and the next thing we'll fix are the links. But to do that, we have to go and create a controller and do some other things. So we'll do that next. Any questions on where we are so far? Yes. So I could require the print or the page pages.css here if I wanted to. Yeah. Okay. Instead of tree, which does alphabetical, I can reword it myself. All right. So I'm not going to load my pages. So. All right. Good question. Anything else? There is a lot to cover to get up to speed here. There's a lot of information. So rewatch the videos and come see me on Friday or after class, and we can go through it again if you have questions. All right. So I'm going to do mine differently than yours. And that was what I was going to say. In Canvas, I have a new document that describes the new requirements. So if you've already started it, look at that new requirements. And I want to make sure that we're going to eventually have a login and a log out button here, or link. But for now, just make it say login. Okay? And when we get to user authentication, we will change this conditionally based on whether they're logged in or not. If they're logged in, that'll say log out. If they're logged out, it'll say log in. All right? Also, on the old one, I had reviews and a shopping cart under the products. That's going to, I just took those out because those are references only. We're going to put on that page the reviews, for instance. Just like when we did PHP, we had a product detail page, and all the reviews for that are underneath. Just like in Amazon, you look at a book detail, they have the reviews on that same page way at the bottom. So we're going to do that same process. All right. So to get to that point and to get to routing and links, we're going to have to create a controller. And unfortunately, I already did that here, so I'm going to delete this. And delete my pages here. And kind of start over here. So how did we create our say controller? Generate. We use the Rails generate command, right? And I can do that from a DOS prompt or a terminal, or I can say tools, run Rails generator, or over here I can also say right-click, new, run the Rails generator. Lots of ways to get to that. And I want to create a new controller, and I want my controller to be called page. Remember, we tried to, you can call it pages if you want, but I'm just going to say singular page. That's what I require on your assignment. Now, one nice thing about this controller is that while I create the controller, I can also create the methods inside of that controller at the same time. So I don't have to add them separately. So what are those? What is another name for the methods inside of a controller? Actions. Okay, so it's saying, what are my action names for this controller? Well, my action names are going to be the pages that I'm going to view. So I'm going to have an action called home and an action called about, action called recipes. So I can add those right here and say, and just separate them with spaces. So I can say home, about, us, recipes, if I can spell recipes, products, articles, calendar, blog, login. Okay, so I can put all of the actions that I want my page controller to deal with, and I can say OK. So it's going to create the actions for me automatically when I tell it to generate that code. Any questions while I wait for this to generate? Okay, so when it finally finished generating here, it generated code for us, a new method or action for every one of those that I put in place. In addition, it created the view folder for page, the page view, and it created all of the HTML files for me automatically as well, named correctly. So there's an About Us page, there's an Articles page, etc. All right. Now one more thing. So now if I go to my system over here, my browser, I can change the say, and how would I get to my login page, for instance? Well, login is what I want to get to, so it would be login, but good. Page is what is called what? The controller. The login is called what? Action. So we're going to go to the controller and action, and there we go. I found my, and it tells me the code, the HTML that was actually in that file. So if I look at that file, the login page, that's the code that was in that, that's the HTML that was in that page. So it's kind of nice when it generates it, it says, where do you find this file? How can I edit this file? So I'm going to go edit that file and add my specific content for my login page.
So basically everything that appears on the login inside your page file, everything that appears on there is what replaces what's in the field?
Yes, exactly right. So the rest of my navigation and all the pictures and stuff gets put around that content that was in this particular file. Okay, good question. Any other questions? All right, so how did Rails know to load this particular controller and that particular file? Well, remember that on the quiz we said, what is the first of the MVC that gets called when a URL comes from a browser? That's the controller, right? So that was, and if you remember the question, I actually said up to knowing what you know so far. I think I said something like that. Because in reality, it actually goes to a routes file before it goes to the controller. So the routing file, we can change how the whole website URLs look and things like that through a routing file. And that's why I spent so much time on how, in the first of the class, on how browsers work, using the 4 verbs, the get, put, post, and delete. Very good. The routing file is in the config folder in a file called routes.rb. All right, and remember that in the first class I had you comment this out, uncomment it out, so that it worked automatically. I'm going to have you comment that back in so that it doesn't have that. And let's see if my stuff still works. All right, so reload the page. I go to recipes. actually I don't have that nav yet working, but if I go to home, it goes to my home page. But if I go to say hello, that no longer works because I took away that generic work for every URL out of the routing file. And that no longer applies anymore. That was a generic catch-all, I'll route anything for you, I don't care what it is, to the right action. Let's go back and look at it. That says go to a controller, and then an action, and then an ID, which we talked about, the edit specific record in the database. So the controller and the action, it figured that out for me, sent me to the say controller automatically, and sent me to the hello action automatically because of this match command in the routes file. So I took that out, that no longer works. So why do my others work? Well, when I created, excuse me, when I did the generate command, it added into the routes file all of these commands for me automatically. And these get destroyed because that was the one I did yesterday for fun. So it reads a lot like what the browsers are going to send the server. So this is the verb that's going to happen, the get, meaning I'm not doing a post, I'm doing a get here. And I want to allow anything to go to the page controller and the home action. I specifically have to tell it, and this is a security thing that Rails started adding. Before, in Rails 2 and below, they allowed this, and that was the way most routing happened. But it opens up a security hole into your server. So they want you to think about exactly what you're going to allow open and put a specific line for each one that you're going to have. So these are the specific routes that I have for my particular page controller. So what this is saying is go to this particular controller and this particular action. And this is what, in fact, the URL is going to look like on the browser itself. So all of that is combined in this one method called get. And this is, again, just Ruby code. This is a method. This is a string parameter to the get method. And it figures out the routing and does everything for you from the browser's perspective. So if I want to go back to say hello and fix that, I'd have to add my own route line in here saying get, and what would my controller be? Say, and my action would be hello. And I'll put one in for my goodbye, which is more secure than just letting anything in. All right, so I can reload that. And now my say hello works again. My say goodbye should work. Googd, you have to spell googd right. All right? So the routing is very important in Rails, and what it gives us a lot of features that we'll talk about later, but we can change the way URLs look to the outside versus what they control on the inside. And we can go to one place here and change the way our whole website looks. And notice also, for those that have had PHP, you don't have this query string in here very much at all. We can remove that because search engines don't like query strings. They typically ignore everything after the question mark. And this is all for SEO, which stands for what? Okay, so this is a nice, very clean URL, /say goodbye. There's no question mark in it. There's no extra parameters. It's a very nice URL. So we can make all of our Rails URLs look nice as well. Okay? All right, any questions on that? Okay, so I told you there's a lot to learn to get into just the routing. Because the routing is used so much in the links that we have in our code, etc., the routing lets us, there's a command in Rails that lets us look at what all the routes are that are set up for my particular application. So that is called rake routes. If you've done any reading, you've seen that that's had to do. So there's a program that Rails comes with called rake, which means, anybody familiar with the program called make? If you guys have ever done any Unix programming, it's a batch file kind of a program that lets you compile programs. Basically, it lets you run commands one after the other so that you could build your application. And in fact, I believe even your C# Visual Studio program still uses it, but it's behind the scenes. You don't see it, but it uses that command to say compile this code, link all these objects together into one executable at the end. And you can, it's a whole language by itself on how to write these make files. They're huge in the Unix world.
Do the make files make .love files?
I don't know. Interesting. So rake is a shortcut for Rails make. They put it together, and that's called rake. So rake is a way of running these tasks that we're going to be doing a lot of. And they've built into the Rails environment some of these tasks. And the one we're going to run right now is called routes. So see, that just shows you all the commands I can do. Tons of commands that deal with testing, that deal with database creation, all kinds of stuff. It lets me create the documentation, etc. All of those are commands that we do a lot of. So I'm going to do the routes command and just let it go without any arguments, and it's going to run that command down here. I could do the same thing in a DOS prompt where I would say, I can't enlarge the font on that one, where, yes, I would just type rake space routes in the directory of my Rails application. It would do the same thing. Okay, this takes a little while to run. And it comes up with a column output here. And let's try to describe, let's do the middle part first. This is what the main command is. That's the command we have in our routes file. So we have a get/page/home. This is actually what the browser would send to your application. And this format is an optional format we'll talk about later. I can actually change this to HTML or JSON or XML or whatever, and it will convert that for me automatically. And this tells it what is the controller and what is the action. It uses a sharp command, a sharp or a hash or whatever you want to call this thing, between the two elements. So I have the controller on the left and the action on the right. So this command goes to the page controller and the home action. This /page/about us goes to the page command controller and the about us action. Everybody see that so far? So as a shortcut, what they do is Rails creates these variables for us for our use inside of our source code. As we're playing around with our link commands and things, this page home says figure out the link of what it would do to go to this action and this controller. So page home is a variable that is created by Ruby for us, or by Rails for us. But because these get so wide, they take away, they don't show two things at the end of it. So page home is actually, let's just show, let's go to our login, and I'll show you some ERB stuff here. So if I output page_home_path to the browser, and there's two forms of this. One is path and one is URL, and I'll show you what the difference is. Okay, so this _URL and _path are assumed at the end of each of these variables. So you can do one or either of those two versions of that variable. So they don't put that in here to save space. That's the only reason they do that. So these are actually variables that are created dynamically by the Rails environment for you to use in your code. So let's see what that comes out to be. That was in my login, right? So I'm going to go to page/login. And the first piece, it doesn't look nice, so let's fix that. Let's put a break tag here. And let's put a break convention, put a big H tag around the whole thing so it's big. All right, so the first one is /page/home. So Rails says interpret what the meaning of that variable is and output it. So it's just a string. It contains a string. So it's like doing a puts on the command line of a variable name. So that command called page _home _path output that string /page/home. Now the URL is a fully qualified URL with the HTTP, the protocol, the host, the port, and the page/home. Why do you think you would use that versus the /page/home? When do you think you'd use that? No. Right. If we send an email out and we send this variable out, the page/home, how does the email know what site to get to? It doesn't. It has no concept. So whenever we send something out, like a newsletter or something to a user, we want to send a fully qualified HTTP : yada 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 out to the email, so they click on it, it comes back to our site. So those are the two different variable names that we can play with, and these are what we're going to use in our link to methods. All right, and we'll do that tomorrow because we're out of time. Any questions?